ready?
Yeah.
All right, welcome back to the Top 25 Voter Pod. Alongside me, as always, is my fellow Top 25 basketball voter, John Werner. Johnny, how are you?
Well, a little tired of being holed up here. I'm ready to get out and actually, cover some games.
Yeah, I was out last night along with, I don't know, maybe 200-300 of my closest friends. It was a small crowd at the Farrell Center on Wednesday night. Personally, I didn't think the roads were too bad.
Okay.
Just a little wet, maybe, but and certainly looking outside today, it looks like things are starting to thaw, so that's good news.
Yeah.
But we did have some basketball last night, and it will certainly continue for this weekend. So the Big 12 men and the women are at the midway point of their conference season. Which teams to you look like the most likely championship contenders when you look at the rest of the season?
The men's race, Texas is 7-2. Then you got four teams at 6-3: Iowa State, K-State, TCU, and Kansas. And then Baylor is 5-4. So anyway, I was looking at the remaining schedules, and to me, K-State definitely has the most favorable schedule remaining. You gotta think most teams are going to win, most of their home games. So road games left for K-State. They're at Tech, at Oklahoma State, and at West Virginia. So that's the bottom half of the conference there. And those are games you would think they would at least split or maybe take 3 out of 4 or even win all 4. So I think the Wildcats definitely have the best schedule, most favorable schedule remaining. You look at Kansas, they still have 5 Big 12 games left, road games left. And among those are Iowa State, TCU, and Texas. So that's 3 of the top teams. And then Texas, just looking at their schedule, they've got to, during the next week, they go to K-State and Kansas. So they may not be in the lead anymore after that. And they still have games at Baylor and TCU. So that's pretty tough. So I think it's probably going to be among those 3 teams. Baylor's 2 games back of Texas right now. So I don't know. I think they would have to just really get incredibly hot, win, 8 of the last 9 or something like that to win it, to do a three-peat. But yeah, I would say K-State in the men's league.
Which, we've talked about it before, but certainly would warrant Jerome Tang a lot of Coach of the Year consideration.
Exactly.
Not just Big 12 wise, but national wise. On the women's side, so right now, believe it or not, the Texas Longhorns are the sole leader of the Big 12 in the women's race. That is by virtue of a 4-game winning streak for the Longhorns, but also Iowa State got upset Wednesday night in the women's game by a point to K-State. That was a little surprising, but it also speaks to something we've talked a lot about, this season. And I think that's the parity within the Big 12 conference, both on the women's side and on the men's side. I think they tend to beat up on each other. As far as, who the contender is looking like, so like I said, Texas is sitting there at 8-2. Texas was a preseason top 10 team. And then, they've really been up and down since. Some of that is injury related, as we, heard from Danny Davis last week on our pod. But, they are healthier now. They still have a player they lost, way back in November. But so, the Longhorns are looking strong, but they still have to go to Iowa State and to Oklahoma. And those are the 2 teams that are right behind them, a game behind them in the Big 12 standings. To me, I kind of like the Cyclones as probably the top contender. They're the top ranked team in the Big 12 right now at 12th in the country. The loss last night was certainly surprising to K-State. They really need Ashley Joens, who's, you know, arguably the best all-around player in the Big 12, to be that for them on a nightly basis. But they have some other players too that have to step up. But you know, I think Iowa State, just based on the schedule, you know, can Baylor sneak in there? You know, one thing I'll say about Baylor, they're going to have a consistently great to elite defensive night pretty much every night, because they're so streaky as shooters. This is a very streak shooting Baylor team. And that much isn't going to change. They're going to have cold streaks. They're going to have hot streaks. They had both last night, you know. You know, they had a really bad shooting first half, and then they hit their first 7 shots of the third quarter. You know, I mean, so that's just the way they go. They're up and they're down offensively. But if they can get really great defense and keep themselves in games, they've got a fighter's chance. I mean, an outside, maybe a puncher's chance at a Big 12 championship, which would, of course, extend that streak that they're on to 13 games. We'll see. But I would say today, Iowa State's looking like the team I would put at the, you know, the top contender spot. So as far as the men go, obviously it's the best league in the country. We know that. I think, you know, the SEC got a little taste of that last weekend.
Right.
You got 6 teams ranked in the top 15 in the country. But with such parity in the league, and with all these teams likely to continue to beat up on one another, does that hurt the Big 12's chances in terms of getting a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And I think if the Big 12 does get a 1 seed, it's probably going to be the number 4 1 seed. So, but yeah, just looking at the top 25 or the top 5 teams in the country right now, you got Purdue, number 1. I think it's highly likely they'll get one. They're 21-1 so far. I think in the SEC, I think we'll probably get one of those. It'll probably either be Tennessee or Alabama. They're both in the top 4 this week. I think Houston will almost assuredly get a top 4 seed because their league isn't as strong. They're 20-2. They've been in the top 5 pretty much all year. They've been number 1 for a few weeks. So I think they'll get one. And then that 4th spot, I think, is going to come down between Arizona from the Pac-12, Virginia from the ACC, or a Big 12 team, which I think will most likely, you know, like we talked before, either be K-State, Kansas, or Texas. You know, when the committee meets, I think they're going to look at the strength of the Big 12 schedule and probably try really hard to make the Big 12 one of those top 4 seeds, number 1 seeds, just because the league is so good and they'll see that they've been beating up on each other. So I think they're going to get one at the end of the year, but you know, it's going to probably go down to the last few games.
It would not surprise me to see the Big 12 champ on the 2 line.
Right.
It really wouldn't. And I think here's where I think it would really help the Big 12 champion in terms of getting a 1 seed. If that regular season champion is then able to go to Kansas City and finish it off with a tournament championship, I would say it would be hard to leave that team off the 1 line. You know,
yeah, that's a good point, Bryce. Yeah,
I mean, if K-State wins the regular season and wins the tournament, you know, they're the team. Same for Kansas, same for Texas, whatever. But that's not easy to do either. You know, it seems like it rarely happens where the regular season champ repeats as the tournament champ. So
Right.
we'll see
Yes.
how that plays out, but that would be hard to beat. So, I get to see Sarah Andrews on a nightly basis.
Mhm.
You've watched these women as well. She's having a tremendous year for Baylor, ranks in the top 5 in the Big 12 in scoring, assists, and 3-point percentage. You think she might be the best guard in the Big 12?
All around, I think so. I mean, I haven't watched as much as you, but every time I turn on the TV, she's making a basket or firing a really good pass to somebody. And yeah, you just look at her stats. I mean, those are pretty solid.
Mhm.
Top 3, and those are basically the guard, categories. Those three, and yeah, and I think she makes a lot of clutch baskets too.
Yeah, so here's a couple things I'll say about Sarah. First of all, I love her energy. So she is one of these players, John. I mean, you've covered players like this that you just love to interview because, first of all, she walks into the interview room every time. I mean, usually win or loss, uh, just like, hey, what's up? Hey. I mean, that's just like she's bringing the party, right?
Yeah.
That's just her personality, and it's very infectious, and we love it. We love to talk to Sarah. As far as Sarah on the court, so I saw this play out last night. First half, Baylor's kind of struggling offensively. I mean, and it wasn't even just the shooting. It was just some convoluted, trying to get shots sometimes. They had just some possessions where it was looking like they were, struggling to get even a good look. And then they put the ball in Sarah's hands and boom, boom, step back, jump shot, and that's the thing about Sarah is she is so creative as a shooter that she can create her own shot, whereas other players on that team may not have that ability. But her ball handling, she had 8 assists last night, 22 points. She's averaging just under 20 in Big 12 play, which is really good. There's other good guards in the league, no question. Breamber Scott from Texas Tech leads the conference in scoring, but she's a very different kind of guard to me. I think she could be classified as a forward. She plays a little bit more in the paint. Sarah, to me, in terms of scoring, facilitating, ball handling, I think you can make the case that she's certainly, if not the best guard in the Big 12, right up there, and it's gonna be fun to watch. Now, I will also say they don't need to have, like, Sarah's had some 30-point games, which is fine. I mean, obviously she's gonna have nights where she goes off. Baylor's at its best when they have 4 to 6 players in double figures.
Right.
That's their game. And Nikki has said it, Sarah can be Sarah, but we need balance. And, in their wins, they've had it. In their losses, they haven't. I mean, so, they basically would rather have Sarah score 22 and have 3 or 4 other players in double figures than have her score 35 and have 1 other player in double figures. So they need that balance. So it's basketball season, but the football schedules were announced this week for the Big 12 for 2023. And of course, we have some new additions to the league coming this fall. So when you look at the men's side of this and these schools that are coming in with BYU, Cincy, UCF, Houston, is it a stronger league, basketball wise?
Well, okay. You add Houston, that definitely makes it stronger.
Sure.
I mean, they're number 3 in the country. They're 20-2. Now, the other 3 are, I would say, they're good this year, but not real good. Cincinnati is 15-8. UCF is 13-8. BYU is 14-10. So, they're having okay years, not great. I don't know from top to bottom if it will be as good. Now the top, you add Houston, that's a big addition.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that makes a Big 12 so good is the bottom teams are still really good, even though their records may not show it. I'm not sure if Cincinnati, UCF, BYU, just judging on this year, if the league, as an entire league, will be quite as good as this year.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get better than it is this year, because it's by far, to me, the best league in the country, top to bottom.
Yeah, and as far as the women goes, I would say they don't have a Houston in terms of, they don't have a team like that where they're adding a top 5, top 10 team in the country. None of the 4 women's teams that will be joining the Big 12 are ranked. I would say BYU is probably the best of those programs. The others, Houston, Cincy, UCF. I think Houston's like 5-3 in the American Conference this year. The other 2, Cincy and UCF, are kind of at the bottom of that league. So it's not just overwhelmingly strong additions on the women's basketball side. I would say BYU is a good program, and more often than not has pretty good teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be interesting to see, just as these teams get in the Big 12, if their recruiting improves, if they make some upgrades to try to, keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. And it'll also be interesting to me. Don't you feel like the Big 12 has a very distinct feel to it? Like on the women's side, it's a very, very physical league. And when you bring 4 new teams in, you just wonder, will they bring a new element to the league? Will they have to adjust to the style of the Big 12? I think it's going to continue to be a physical league. The other thing on the women's side, and I don't know, you can speak to this on the men's, but in the women's side, you have a lot of teams that do different things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody runs the same stuff. You have some teams that are more post oriented, some teams that are more guard oriented. Obviously everybody shoots threes nowadays, but for some teams that's a bigger part of their offense than others. So that's what's kind of unique, about the Big 12, is that all the different looks you get. And so, in that sense, these 4 new teams can kind of be whoever they want to a certain extent. Now, like I said, the physical nature of the Big 12 may be a little eye-opening to them. I bet it's a little more physical than the American.
Yeah. Another thing you got to consider, it's not going to be a double round robin anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're not going to have 26 conference games.
Right.
So there's going to be, some questions asked. Right now, the winner, they've played everybody twice. So you can't really question, if they're deserving of it. Next year, it's not going to be that way. There's going to be some questions about who's playing the tougher schedule, all that kind of stuff. So there will be a lot more going into it, I think, with the expanded league. And once Texas and OU leave, you still couldn't play what would it be, a 22 game schedule? I don't think that would work.
No.
That's a lot of conference games.
Sure, it is. So yeah, that's the downside of, and I wouldn't even say that this is a super conference in terms of, I think when people think of a super conference, you're thinking of 16 teams or more,
right?
Which gets really unwieldy. but
Yeah.
but that may be where we're headed eventually. And of course, one thing, and we can talk about this more probably on a future podcast, but the idea of Gonzaga has been thrown out.
Woo.
And you talk about getting the basketball league better. Holy crap.
Yeah, there might be some teams that don't want to play basketball anymore. If you had Gonzaga, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to win many games.
We're going to go football only.
Right.
Yeah, we'll see, man. I tell you, you get the Zags in there with Kansas and Baylor and Houston.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that'd be something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting certainly to see from all perspectives, all sports really, what these new 4 teams bring. I think, we've talked about it before, but I think among the free agents out there in terms of schools looking to go to different conferences, I think they did pretty well,
Oh yeah.
and certainly it really comes to the forefront in football. That's where these 4 programs have been better.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's see. Baylor men have Texas Tech this weekend.
Yeah, noon Saturday.
Yeah. And the women, meanwhile, will play the aforementioned Iowa State. That's going to be a tough game. They got to go to Ames, and the Cyclones are coming off of a loss.
Oh,
yeah. They'll probably be fired up, but I mean, it's the Big 12. Anything can happen. So we'll see what does happen.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
See you, Bryce.
All right.